Her back pain brought us to the massage table. Little did I know it wasn't just her knots being worked out, but our marriage unraveling strand by strand. Emily and I always seemed like the couple who had it all figured out. I'm Adam, a 36-year-old software engineer who's been married to Emily for 9 years. We live in a quiet suburb filled with picket fences, barbecue Sundays, and neighborhood potlucks. The kind of place where kids on bikes race home before the streetlights flicker on. Emily, my wife, is the definition of warmth. At least, that's what I always thought. She's 34, a fourth-grade teacher who knows the name of every kid in her class and makes homemade cookies during parent-teacher conferences. But as much as our life looked perfect on paper, I'd be lying if I said we weren't starting to drift apart. It started a few months ago, with Emily's back pain. At first, it was minor. A nagging discomfort after long days on her feet. I offered to help, buy a new chair, try some stretches, even a DIY massage. She brushed me off. "I'll handle it, Adam," she'd say with a tired smile, her hand absently rubbing the base of her spine. Soon, she booked an appointment with a massage therapist. "It's this amazing place," she gushed over dinner one evening. "Mark, the therapist, has incredible hands. He worked miracles on my coworker Sarah's sciatica." I didn't think much of it then. I was just glad she was taking care of herself. But after a few weeks, something shifted. She started going to Mark's clinic twice a week, sometimes 3. Her back pain, she said, had all but vanished, yet she continued to go, for maintenance. Our schedules began to misalign, her massage appointments stretched late into the evening, and more often than not, I'd eat dinner alone. I chalked it up to her needing me time. She worked hard, after all. But as the sessions with Mark increased, our own connection seemed to vanish. We used to be inseparable. Even in the mundane moments, watching reruns of old sitcoms, arguing over takeout menus, or sneaking off to bed early just because we wanted more time together. Now, she seemed distracted. At first, it was subtle. She'd sit next to me on the couch, scrolling her phone instead of leaning into my shoulder like she used to. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she'd make excuses, too tired, too stressed, her back acting up again. It went from a few times a week to once a month, then not at all. "You're reading into things," I told myself. "She's just busy." But there were other signs, too. She started dressing differently, nicer, more stylish. When I commented on it, she said, "I just feel like putting in a little effort." Is that a crime? Her phone, once left carelessly on the counter or by her bedside, was now glued to her. She'd take it into the bathroom, and it was always on silent. When I asked about it, she waved it off, saying she didn't want her students' parents blowing up her notifications. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But one evening, as I was finishing up a late-night debugging session in my home office, I heard her laugh, soft, almost flirtatious, from the living room. When I walked in, she quickly locked her phone and gave me a strained smile. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Sarah," she replied too quickly, not meeting my eyes. "She's stressing about the school fundraiser." I let it go. But that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, something gnawed at me. A quiet, persistent doubt. The Emily I knew was slipping away, and I had no idea how to get her back. It was a Thursday night, one of those evenings when everything felt off. Emily had gone for her usual session, leaving me alone in our too-quiet house. I sat on the couch, laptop open, pretending to work. In reality, I was watching the clock. Her session should have ended 2 hours ago. When she finally walked in, she looked flustered, hair slightly messy, cheeks flushed. I greeted her with a casual, "Long session tonight?" She hesitated just a moment too long before responding. "Yeah, Mark's appointments ran late. He squeezed me in last minute." I didn't want to cancel. Squeezed her in. The words twisted something in my gut. I didn't push it then, but as the days passed, that unease grew. I started piecing things together, the long sessions, the late-night texting, the way she'd lock her phone the moment I entered the room. One night, while we were watching TV, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at it quickly, her lips twitching into a brief smile before flipping it face down. "Who's that?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Sarah," she said without looking at me. "She's venting about her class." A harmless enough answer, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Emily had always been bad at lying, her tone would shift, her eyes would dart. And right then, her voice sounded forced. The next morning, I got my first break. She left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to grab her keys. It buzzed again. I didn't mean to look, but the preview caught my eye. "Mark, can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible." My stomach dropped. The rest of the message was cut off, but it was enough to light every alarm bell in my head. I stared at the phone, my pulse pounding. When she came back down, I played it cool, handing her the phone with a casual, "You got a message." "Oh, thanks," she said, locking the screen immediately. Her hands fumbled slightly, and for the first time, I noticed her avoiding my gaze. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying beside her in bed, my mind raced through every interaction, every excuse. I needed to know. The opportunity came a few nights later. Emily was rushing to get ready for her session, and in her hurry, she left her phone charging on the bedside table. She kissed my cheek absently. "Don't wait up," she said before heading out the door. As soon as I heard the garage door close, I grabbed her phone. Her lock screen had a simple 4-digit code. Thankfully, I knew it, her birthday. My hands trembled as I keyed it in, praying I was wrong. I wasn't. The messages between her and Mark confirmed everything. "Mark, I can't believe how good you make me feel. Emily, you're amazing. I never thought I'd feel this way. Mark, I'll clear my last appointment tomorrow so we have more time. Emily, perfect. I'll tell Adam it's a special session." My hands tightened around the phone. Special session? Was she mocking me? I scrolled further, my chest tightening with every message. They weren't just flirtatious, they were intimate. Detailed. Descriptions of their moments together. Times. Places. Even a joke about how she could always find an excuse to get out of the house. I felt sick. But one message in particular stopped me cold. "Mark, looking forward to seeing you tonight. Back entrance, like last time." I checked the time. She'd been gone for less than 30 minutes. If I hurried, I could catch her. The clinic was a 10-minute drive away, though it felt like an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I arrived, the main lights of the clinic were off, but a dim glow seeped out from the back. I parked a block away, not wanting her to see me. I walked quietly, my heart pounding in my ears. As I approached the back entrance, I heard muffled laughter. Her laughter. Peering through the window, I saw them. Emily, sitting on the massage table, laughing as Mark stood close, his hand on her leg. It wasn't professional. It wasn't innocent. For a moment, I couldn't move. This was my wife, the woman I'd built a life with, sharing this intimacy with someone else. I turned and left. I didn't trust myself to confront them then and there. My mind was spinning too fast, emotions colliding like a car crash. I didn't confront her that night. No, I needed more than suspicion. I needed the truth laid bare, no room for her to twist her way out of it. The next evening, Emily announced she had another session. Mark said he had a late opening, she mentioned casually, slipping into her jacket. She kissed me on the cheek, but it felt robotic. "Don't wait up." She left, and I followed. The clinic was quiet when I arrived, the parking lot empty except for one car. Mark's. I parked at a distance and waited. About 15 minutes later, the clinic's front lights clicked off, and Mark emerged, locking the doors behind him. He looked relaxed, whistling as he pocketed his keys and headed toward his car. "Guess that's the end of tonight's sessions," I muttered to myself. I started my car as if to leave, but instead, I circled back to the alley behind the building. If Mark was done for the night, why would Emily still be coming here? Not 5 minutes later, I got my answer. Emily's car pulled up, headlights off as she rolled into the alley. My breath caught as I watched her step out, glancing around nervously before knocking on the clinic's back door. It opened almost immediately. "Mark." He smiled, pulling her inside with a familiarity that made my stomach churn. The door shut, leaving me in the dark, but I didn't need to see more. I knew what was happening. By the time Emily got home, I was sitting at the dining table, the lights dimmed, her phone on the table in front of me. I'd opened it again and left the incriminating messages visible on the screen. She walked in, humming softly, her keys jingling in her hand. When she saw me, she froze. "Hey," she said cautiously. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I gestured to the seat across from me. "We need to talk." Her brows furrowed, and she hesitated before sitting. "What's going on?" I didn't answer immediately, instead sliding her phone across the table toward her. "Care to explain these?" Emily glanced down, and the color drained from her face. She quickly locked the screen and looked up at me with forced calm. "Why are you going through my phone, Adam? That's what you're worried about? Me going through your phone?" My voice was tight, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "What about the fact that you've been sneaking around with Mark?" Her eyes widened in mock shock. "Sneaking around? Adam, you're being ridiculous. Mark is just my massage therapist." "Really?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Because from what I saw tonight, you're a little more than just his client." Her face went pale, and she stammered, What are you talking about?" "I went to the clinic," I said evenly. "Saw him lock up. Then I saw you show up after hours, sneaking in through the back door." Emily's jaw tightened, and she shook her head. "You followed me?" she asked incredulously. "Do you hear how insane that sounds?" "What's insane is my wife lying to my face," I snapped. "Don't bother denying it, Emily. I saw you." She folded her arms, her defensive walls going up. "You're overreacting. Mark was helping me with some advanced techniques for my back pain. It's nothing like what you're imagining." I laughed bitterly. "Advanced techniques? Is that what you call meeting after hours, exchanging flirty messages, and sneaking around?" Her eyes darted away, and I could see the gears turning as she scrambled for an explanation. "The messages, they were harmless. Just joking around. You know how people get close when they work together often." "Cut the crap, Emily." My voice was sharp, cutting through her excuses. "I saw the way he touched you in that clinic. The way you looked at him. That's not harmless." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I can't believe this. You're acting like some paranoid lunatic, spying on me and going through my phone. Don't you trust me?" "Trust you?" I stood, matching her energy. "You've been lying to me for weeks. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to hear our neighbors talk about the familiar car parked at Mark's house overnight? Or to read those texts about how he can't stop thinking about you?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "Those texts don't mean anything, Adam. You're blowing this out of proportion. Mark is just a friend. Stop." I slammed my hand on the table, and she flinched. "Stop lying to me, Emily. Just admit it." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Finally, she crossed her arms and looked away, her voice dropping. Fine. Maybe I got too close to him. But it's not what you think. We haven't done anything. Right, I said coldly. And I'm supposed to believe that? Her silence was answer enough. She began pacing, running her hands through her hair. You don't understand, Adam. I've been stressed, work, life, everything. Mark, he listens. He makes me feel seen. And I don't. She stopped and turned to me, her expression softening. You've been so busy, so distant. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did. The audacity of her words struck me like a blow. So, this is my fault now. I'm the reason you've been sneaking around behind my back. That's not what I'm saying, she snapped. But maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have felt so alone. I let out a hollow laugh. Alone? Emily, I've been here, trying to connect with you, and you've been pulling away. Don't put this on me. She opened her mouth to argue but closed it again, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you, Adam. I needed something for me. Something for you. My voice cracked, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. You had something for you. Us. Our marriage. And you threw it away for what? A thrill? She didn't answer, her silence speaking volumes. I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there. I needed space, air, anything to escape the suffocating weight of her betrayal. As I sat in the car, staring at the empty street, one thought consumed me: this wasn't the end. Not yet. I wasn't just going to walk away from this without exposing the truth. The silence of the car wrapped around me as I sat in the driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Inside the house, Emily was probably pacing, rehearsing whatever excuse she thought would smooth this over. But no excuse could fix what she'd broken. Betrayal has a unique way of sinking in. It doesn't hit all at once. It drips slowly, like a leaky faucet, every drop a reminder of what you've lost. That night, it felt like the floodgates had opened. I sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard, my mind replaying every moment of the last few months. The late nights, the locked phone, the excuses. All the signs had been there, but I'd ignored them, convincing myself that she'd never do something like this. I wasn't just angry. I was gutted. How did I let this happen? Had I been a bad husband? Too wrapped up in work. Too predictable, too boring. I thought back to our early years, late-night talks about our dreams, stolen kisses in crowded rooms, the way she used to light up when I walked in the door. When had that faded? Was I so blind that I didn't notice her slipping away? The questions were relentless, and the answers felt like knives. The next morning, I couldn't stay in the house. The weight of her presence was suffocating, her every move a reminder of what she'd done. I told her I was going for a run, but I ended up at the gym. It had been years since I'd worked out seriously, but that day, I didn't care about being rusty. I needed to hit something hard. The weights became my outlet. With every rep, I channeled my anger, my sadness, my betrayal. Sweat poured down my face, and my muscles screamed, but it felt good. The gym became my sanctuary. Each morning, I'd wake up early, throw on my gear, and leave before Emily could say a word. The physical pain was a distraction, a temporary reprieve from the storm inside my head. As the days passed, the anger started to burn less fiercely, replaced by a cold determination. If she thought she could lie to me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. I started small, combing through her phone again when she wasn't looking. I screenshot every incriminating text and saved them to a hidden folder on my laptop. It was painful, reading their exchanges, seeing how easily she gave her affection to another man. But I needed proof, not just for me, but for what I planned to do next. The real breakthrough came when I decided to hire a private investigator. His name was Rick, an older guy with a gruff voice and a no-nonsense attitude. Most of these cases are pretty straightforward, he told me when we met in his office. If she's sneaking around, we'll catch her. Just give me the details, and I'll take care of the rest. I handed over everything I had, her schedule, the messages, even the nights I suspected she was meeting Mark. Rick nodded, jotting it all down in a notepad. Give me a week, he said. I'll get you what you need. Waiting was the hardest part. Every time she left the house, I wondered if she was meeting him. Every time her phone buzzed, I fought the urge to grab it and check. But I held back. If I confronted her again without solid proof, she'd just weasel her way out. At home, things were tense but oddly civil. Emily was trying to act normal, like we could just brush this under the rug and move on. She cooked dinner, asked about my day, even suggested we watch a movie together. I played along, keeping my tone neutral, my answers short. If she noticed how cold I was, she didn't say anything. At night, I lay awake, replaying everything in my head. I felt like a fool for trusting her, for letting her lies seep into the cracks of our marriage. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't about me. It wasn't my fault she chose to betray me. Whatever excuses she had, stress, loneliness, boredom, they didn't justify what she'd done. A week later, Rick called. You're going to want to see this, he said. We met at a diner on the outskirts of town. He slid a manila envelope across the table, his face unreadable. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photos, Emily and Mark at a bar, her hand on his arm, leaning in close. Another of them leaving the clinic late at night, his hand resting on the small of her back. The final nail in the coffin, a blurry shot of her car parked in his driveway overnight. Rick handed me a USB drive. Videos are on there. Should hold up in court if it comes to that. I nodded, my throat tight. Thanks, Rick. This is more than I expected. He gave me a sympathetic look. You're not the first guy to go through this, and you won't be the last. Just make sure you use this wisely. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the evidence laid out before me. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to shove the photos in her face and watch her squirm. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. No, I needed to do this right. I needed to show her that she couldn't just walk all over me and expect to get away with it. As I packed the evidence into a folder, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't over, not yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control. She had played her game. Now it was my turn. When I asked Emily to dinner at our favorite restaurant, she hesitated. It wasn't unusual, we hadn't exactly been us for a while, but this time, I pressed. I think we need a night out, I said, keeping my tone light. Just you and me. Like old times. After a moment, she agreed, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. That evening, we arrived at Rinaldi's, a cozy Italian place where we used to celebrate anniversaries. The familiarity of the setting, the soft lighting, the smell of fresh bread, felt almost surreal given what I had planned. We ordered wine, shared appetizers, and even laughed over old memories. For a moment, it was like we were back in the early days of our marriage. I almost forgot why we were there. Almost. The main course arrived, and as Emily took her first bite of risotto, I placed the manila folder on the table between us. Her fork froze mid-air. "What's that?" she asked, her voice wary. I leaned back, folding my arms. "It's everything, Emily. The texts, the photos, the videos. Proof of what you've been doing behind my back." Her face went pale, her hand trembling as she set her fork down. "Adam, I can explain." "No," I cut her off, my voice firm but quiet. "You've had weeks to explain. Months, even. But instead, you lied. Over and over again. She glanced around nervously, noticing the nearby diners. "Can we not do this here?" she hissed. I shook my head. "Why not? You didn't care about privacy when you were sneaking around with Mark." She started to speak, but I opened the folder, sliding a photo across the table. It was one of her leaving Mark's house late at night. Her mouth opened, then closed again, no words coming out. "I trusted you," I said, my voice low but steady. "I gave you the benefit of the doubt, even when everything pointed to this. But you made your choice, Emily. And now I'm making mine." She reached for my hand, her eyes glistening with tears. "Adam, please. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Stop," I said, pulling my hand away. "Don't insult me with that. You don't accidentally sneak around for months. You don't accidentally lie to your husband's face." Her tears started to fall, but I felt no sympathy. "Not anymore. I've already filed for divorce," I said, sliding another paper across the table. "You'll be served tomorrow." The color drained from her face as she stared at the document. "Divorce?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Adam, don't do this. We can work through this. I'll stop seeing him, I swear." I laughed bitterly. "You think this is about him? It's about trust, Emily. About respect. Two things you clearly don't have for me." She tried to argue, but I stood up, tossing cash onto the table. "Dinner's on me. Enjoy the risotto." And with that, I walked out, leaving her stunned and speechless. Over the next few weeks, I set my plan into motion. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just for the divorce, it was my ticket to exposing the truth. I sent the photos and videos anonymously to Mark's employer, who quickly launched an investigation. Within days, Mark's license was revoked for unethical behavior with a client. Next, I shared the evidence discreetly with a few key people in our social circle. I didn't want to humiliate Emily outright, that wasn't the goal, but I wasn't going to let her control the narrative either. The fallout was swift. Friends who once adored her began to distance themselves, whispers of her betrayal spreading like wildfire. Even her family, who had always been in her corner, started questioning her choices. Meanwhile, I focused on moving forward. I worked with my lawyer to ensure I kept the house, not just for me but for our future co-parenting arrangement. I set firm boundaries, communication about our kids only, no unnecessary interactions. Emily tried to reach out a few times, sending long, emotional messages about second chances and how much she regretted her actions. I didn't respond. One evening at the gym, I met someone. Her name was Rachel, a fitness trainer who'd been through her own messy divorce. We started talking, first about workouts, then about life. There was something refreshing about her. She didn't pity me or try to fix me. She simply listened, sharing her own stories of betrayal and resilience. It wasn't long before we started seeing each other outside the gym. It was slow, cautious, but it felt real. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Now, looking back on it all, I realize Emily's betrayal didn't break me, it revealed my strength. Loyalty is a two-way street, and love is built on trust. If she couldn't value either, then she didn't deserve me. To anyone who's been through this kind of betrayal, my advice is simple: trust your instincts, but don't act out of rage. The best revenge isn't ruining their life, it's reclaiming your own. Walking away isn't easy, but it's worth it. You're worth it.